I want to talk about what's going on over in France in regards to fake news. So here's the headline here from Politico.eu. It's where I'm at. Macron's fake news laws will protect democracy. So this is, President Macron over in France. President Macron kicked off the year by announcing the introduction of legislation to safeguard liberal democracy in France, at least, from fake news. All right. So, I'm just reading about this for the first time, you guys, and there's a little bit of a few red flags that go up right away. First of all, who do we assign to determine what is and isn't fake news? Do we use the government? Do we use some kind of outside party? Do we use, like who? In many ways, it's a rhetorical question. Who is qualified to make that designation? Especially here in the United States, where we have a lot of things that are called quote unquote fake news that are not fake news. So let's go through this. All right. Twitter commentators were quick to attack him, this is in regards to Macron, for oversimplifying the problem to make a political point, and they may be right, but at its core, Macron's instinct is the right one. This is according to the article I'm looking at. We need to rethink the rules of engagement in social media and hold accountable producers, distributors, and financiers of content without compromising on freedom of speech. Okay, well, that's not an easy task. Macron's proposal includes tougher rules for social media platforms when it comes to revealing the sources of sponsored content. It would also strengthen the authority of France's media watchdog, the Conseil supérieur de l'audiovisuel. Don't speak French. No, I don't know if you could tell. I don't speak French. Or CSA, to impose heavy fines on outlets who publish or distribute lies, rumors, and gossip. Parlo italiano, così così. All right. So, first of all, right away, sponsored content is 100% of the time fake news. Sponsored content is just automatically fake news. Because what sponsored content is it's paid content, and it's basically a PR piece that's passed off as journalism. Now, getting back into this paragraph, I don't know if you should do anything to the distributors. That raises a red flag, because a lot of people that share sponsored content don't realize that's what they're doing, because sponsored content is intended to trick you. They want you to think you're reading a piece of journalism when in reality you are reading a piece of propaganda, and you're just reading a press release, but it's being passed off as news. Recently, a Sinclair broadcasting station was airing sponsored content, passing it off as a news report for over a year, and they finally got caught. They got sued. The institution was a cancer institution. And I don't know much about the institution itself, so maybe it was one of the good ones. Maybe it was one of the not so ethical ones. I have no clue. But in principle, that doesn't really necessarily matter, because what was going on there was illegal. You can't use sponsored content and pass it off as news and not tell people that this is what it is. Personally, I think sponsored content should just be straight up illegal. I think a commercial should be a commercial, and I think news should be news. We already blur the lines between news and PR. Sponsored content eliminates those lines completely. So I think in principle it should just be illegal anyway. But, that's kind of like a moral stance. So, I mean, that's one thing, that if it is sponsored content, meaning a company paid, like a good example of sponsored content, you'll get an environmental article on the internet about, say, fracking, just as a for instance. And then at the bottom of that article, you'll see an article down below that looks like an article, and it's from ExxonMobil. And it's talking about how fracking's actually really good for jobs, fracking's not dangerous, et cetera, et cetera. And at the bottom of the article, there is a small disclaimer saying that it's sponsored content, saying that, hey, this isn't actually a news report, this isn't actually a rebuttal, this is a paid commercial, essentially. So, a lot of times people share sponsored content not knowing that's what they're doing. So, over in France when they're talking about the rules of engagement. Bella Ryan, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the magic wand and the diamonds. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Bella Ryan. Thank you. Macron's proposal includes tougher rules for social media platforms when it comes to revealing the sources of sponsored content. I have no problem with revealing the sources. I have no problem with, if it's sponsored content, there's a bigger disclaimer so people know that's what it is. That's fine. As far as like penalizing a user, that draws a red flag to me, because a lot of people will share sponsored content not realizing that's what they're doing. It'd be great if there was a way for them to more easily realize that's what they're doing, sure. But should they be penalized for it? Should they, like, have their account be suspended or something like that? I don't think so. Furthermore, who's the authority that's going to enforce that? So you see how this is a pretty complex issue. To be sure, it's usually problematic when the state gets involved, this is back to the article, in defining what constitutes the truth. Sure, yeah, totally get it. But liberal democracies are engaged in an uneven information war, and in the muddy trenches, it's hard to decipher fact from fiction. The stakes are high. Our hearts and minds and the values that underpin the free and open society we take for granted. Something has to be done, all right? To stay on the right side of freedom of speech, Macron's proposal will have to include a workable definition of fake news. The expression is quickly becoming watered down to a point where it can mean anything, from an argument someone disagrees with to carefully crafted sinister lies that set out to change the course of democratic processes. Macron's legislation will have to address this. Yeah, and again, that's not an easy task. A number of players will also need to acknowledge their responsibility for the fake news problem. The platform giants who claim innocence are the ultimate enablers. Massive lobbying efforts, and this is the article, by the way. This is the article's point of view, maybe not my own. The platform giants who claim innocence are the ultimate enablers. Massive lobbying efforts are sure to be undertaken as Google, Facebook, and Twitter try to push back on any legislation that would hold them accountable for the content disseminated on their platforms. Facebook, as much as it would like to self-regulate, should not be allowed to do so. As Sandy Paracalis, a former employee who led Facebook's efforts to fix privacy problems on its developer platform, recently pointing out in a column in the New York Times, what I saw from the inside was a company that prioritized data collections from its users over protecting them from abuse. Lawmakers shouldn't allow Facebook to regulate itself because it won't. Absolutely. So if you try to impose rules where if somebody shares fake news, quote unquote, on your platform, you're going to hold the platform itself accountable, you're going to get a cyclical effect where places like Facebook and Twitter are going to start self-regulating, and they're going to determine what is and isn't fake news. And do you really want a bunch of Silicon Valley billionaires determining what is and isn't free speech? Because we rely on these platforms. I mean, these platforms at this point are treading on the waters of a public utility, meaning people rely on it for communication, which, again, there's a kind of concern over the fact that these platforms are still privately owned companies and can do essentially whatever they want, and have already proven in many, for instances, that our information is the most valuable thing they have. So Macron's legislation is clearly a response to foreign and for now overwhelmingly Russian, again, this is back to the article, interference in electoral processes. He has publicly criticized Russian news sites RT and Sputnik, but has not made clear how he intends to police them. In the debate around this new law, we also need to consider the motor of this debacle. You and me and everyone who clicks on, reads, and shares fake news. So that right there is another red flag. What's been going on here in the States with RT America is basically just xenophobic McCarthyism. So back to Russia then. Exactly. And Macron, I'm not fluent in Macron's politics. I'm not going to pretend that I am. But, the basis of it is that he's kind of your centrist, kind of your establishment politician, kind of comparable to an established Democrat here in the United States. I'd imagine he's to the left of them because, France is a way more progressive country than the United States. But, that's essentially where he's at. So it would make sense that he'd be on board with the whole Russiagate That would make sense. And I just had a sip of coffee from my Kurt Vonnegut coffee mug. Somebody just said, Merry Christmas. You're a little late. Christmas is over. But thank you for the sentiment. I had a wonderful holiday season, and I hope you did as well. He at least takes climate change seriously. Right, that's that's our bar now. That's our bar now. Do you acknowledge peer-reviewed science? If you do, you're a step ahead of a lot of politicians that are out there. Do you acknowledge peer-reviewed science? You like my mug? It's a pretty cool mug. It's my Kurt Vonnegut mug. I like it a lot myself. Thank you very much. So, I mean, if this is going to be where the state is determining which outlets are and aren't fake news, I'm adamantly against that. I don't think anybody has any kind of right to make that kind of designation. Furthermore, I see some very sharp red flags. You know, I mean, over here in the United States, we required RT America to register as a foreign agent. We required a Chinese outlet to also register as a foreign agent. And the whole FARA doctrine was introduced in the first place to try to deter Nazi propaganda. However, now it's being used to attack independent media in general, and in particular, any types of bureaus that have any connection to Russia. And again, these are American bureaus. You know, Sputnik here in the United States is an American bureau with American journalists. Same with RT America. Foreign bureaus of different news agencies are common all around the world. That's how we have a global conversation easier. That's why we have Al Jazeera America, BBC America, RT America. And we have American outlets over in other countries. We have American news outlets in Russia. There's a reason for all this. So to kind of paint these outlets just because they're because of their foreign affiliation as fake news, that's xenophobia. And you know, you want to say, oh well, you know, if they get funding from foreign outlets, that's a conflict of interest. Okay, you know what else is a conflict of interest? Getting money from Comcast, being owned by Comcast, being owned by an ultra-conservative fringe right-wing mogul. Being owned by somebody who's just a businessman that could care less about news. Those are all conflicts of interest as well. I mean, if other countries did what we did in the United States when it comes to media, we would use that as a reason to just discredit those countries automatically. And if you don't believe me, go up to a stranger and just be like, just say, hey, did you know that in Australia, the media, like their media is owned by the same people that make bombs? So they have an incentive. Their media has an incentive to keep them at war all the time. Did you know that about Australia? No, I didn't know that about Australia. Isn't that crazy? Oh my God, yeah, that's terrible. Man, Australia. Good thing we live in the democracy of the United States, right? Yeah, good thing, right? Glad we're not in Australia. Oh wait, did I say Australia? I meant the United States, because MSNBC up until recently was owned by General Electric, who makes bombs. Now they're owned by the much more ethical company, Comcast, who always wins award for their excellent customer service. So you know what I mean? I mean, and who's to say? So you guys get the idea. If the state is going to determine who is and isn't fake news, and their bar is it a domestic source or not, that's absolutely ridiculous, whether you're in France or whether you're in the United States. And furthermore, if you're going to crack down on sponsored content, that could be an okay thing. However, you have to figure out a very efficient way to implement that. And letting Silicon Valley folks at Twitter and Facebook determine what is and isn't free speech isn't the answer. Nor is... I mean, if anything, you should just say sponsored content's not legal anymore. That a news outlet can't accept sponsored content from an advertiser. They either have to accept a commercial or not a commercial. And if it's not a commercial, guess what it isn't? It isn't news. You know, why does sponsored content even exist unless it was to trick people? Why not just have a commercial? Why do you need to write a piece of fake journalism and have a little disclaimer at the bottom saying, oh, this is sponsored content. This isn't actual journalism. Just kidding. Why do you need to do that? The only reason it exists is to trick people. That's really the only reason it exists. So if you really want to combat fake news at the state level and not tread on some very dangerous waters of causing really dangerous cyclical effects to free speech, just outlaw sponsored content. Start there. That's something that you can implement that would make sense to do. So I think the only thing that makes sense to do is, as far as policy goes, at least a good way to start, outlaw sponsored content. Hey guys, thanks for watching. That was a clip from Get Your News On with Ron, the world's first viewer-curated streaming news show. What does that mean? That means I log on to a stream and people tweet me articles over on Twitter at Ron Placone, or they use our Reddit subsection, which is just Get Your News On with Ron over on Reddit. And that's how we build the show. I'm seeing all these articles for the first time. We are literally getting our news on together. Follow me on Twitter at Ron Placone so you can participate. And this show streams live every Tuesday through Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So please do tune in. If you want to support this show, you can do so over on patreon.com/Ron Placone, where for as low as $1 a month, you get access to exclusive podcasts every week, exclusive videos, free tickets to shows when I'm performing in your town, and more for as low as $1 a month. Please do consider it. Thank you so much for your support. This has been Get Your News On with Ron.